Hello and welcome to Out of India Theory. Hope you guys are doing well. We have another very special podcast today. My guest for tonight is somebody who I can describe as a veteran in the remote viewing and the intelligence community. She has combined more than 3 decades of almost 32 years of experience in the US intelligence community in various capacities, various roles. And she worked with the Defense Intelligence Agency for about approximately 9 years to like a decade on the Stargate program as a remote viewer at Fort Meade. And she recently, well, relatively recently retired from government service in 2010 and has been working on freelancing, consulting on private projects, and working as a trainer at the Monroe Institute, and probably a lot of other things which I'm sure she'll tell us. Angela Ford, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the channel. How are you doing?
Fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So I should say accidentally came across some of your podcasts on YouTube, and I was really fascinated by the work that you have been doing. And someone who's worked with the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency on the Stargate program for so long, in I would say both in the traditional intelligence role as well as unconventional sort of non-ordinary ways of intelligence gathering role. So I found that very fascinating, and I wanted to talk to you about your journey and exactly what happened. So first of all, I probably want to ask you. I'm sure a role like this comes with a lot of top secret clearances. So is there something that you're allowed to say and stuff that you're still not allowed to say?
The program was officially closed in 1995. I believe that a lot of the information was declassified in 1998, and um, and it's been so long that after a while information just is automatically declassified. What I talk about and what I say, I know I can say. Now, are you asking, is there a program going on?
Yeah, I was just joking about whether if there are spooks watching us, and if there's like a car waiting outside your window trying to
No, no,
eavesdrop,
no.
like we see in the movies. So I know that you had these experiences as a kid, and you had out of body experiences, and you believe it's something that's genetic and it ran in the family. So could you sort of set the stage a little bit on exactly where this journey? Because for people like, let's say, quote unquote ordinary people in the rest of the world, something like this is what, like, stuff of movies and science fiction. Somebody who's an actual psychic spy who's done this on a professional basis with a reliable amount of accuracy. So maybe we could start from the beginning, if you can tell us.
Well, I can remember as a child being very young and going out of body. And I can remember, my body, me leaving my body, going out a window or a door and flying. So I remember those experiences very vividly. Probably, I was probably before it was before I went to school. So I do remember that. I do remember dreams that I had when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and a lot of the dreams that I had were predictive. I can remember telling my mother about my dreams because they were different. The dreams were different than just regular dreaming. Now, my mother, she more or less listened to me. She would say, "Tell me about your dreams," or she would listen. She wouldn't. Um, she wouldn't say
Right.
no. That's not, you're crazy or whatever. So that allowed me to keep, I guess, doing these predictive dreams. Now, at the time, as a child growing up, my mother had a very deep interest in the paranormal. And I can remember her buying, she bought an encyclopedia of all paranormal activity. We still have it at the house I grew up in. She would buy Edgar Casey material. She talked about reincarnation. And I ignored it all because I just thought the woman was just, like, I don't know this woman. It wasn't my thing. But I do remember the paraphernalia sitting around the house.
Right.
Now, my mother she would make, I don't know, she had a sense of knowing things. She, um, she, she knew when popes were going to die. She knew what the next pope was going to be named. She understood. She had made predictions about the Israeli 48-day war with Israeli. But we never considered her psychic. We never thought of her as psychic. It was just that's how she was. Now, what happened was is I graduated from college in political science and I went to a local university where I grew up in Western Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
And I couldn't get a job after I graduated for about 2 years, close to 2 years. So I did a little bit of everything. I worked at a restaurant. I moved to an area about 5 hours east of Pennsylvania to the Poconos, and I worked on a resort there.
Right.
And then I came back, and I still really didn't have. I just didn't have the job that I wanted. But when I worked at the Poconos, my car was stolen, and there was a cop that helped retrieve my car, and I was with my sister. My sister had a criminology background, and we really wanted to be police officers in Pennsylvania. So the police academy was shut down. Year after year, we would wait. So the cop finally told us. He said, "I don't." He says the police academy's not taking. It's closed. They're not taking recruits.
Right.
Why don't you both try to go to work for the FBI in Washington D.C.? So that's what I did. So we put in our application. I moved back to near Western Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh. So my application was in, and I needed a clearance. So they do a security clearance on you where somebody investigates your background. Well, while I was waiting for the security clearance to come through to move to Washington D.C., which is about 5 hours from where I was born and raised, there I took a nighttime class at the local university where I went to school. And it was taught by a chemistry professor who had ESP abilities. So he taught this class, it was called ESP. So I decided to take his class because I was always interested in it. Well, I think I lasted in his class for 2 or 3 weeks, but I received a phone call. I got a job at a factory at night. I had to go to this factory and work. So I had to quit the class because I needed the money to move from Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. So that's what I did. So I came down to Washington, D.C., and I worked for the FBI for about a year and a half. I don't have the eyesight to become I didn't have the eyesight to become an FBI agent,
Right.
so I didn't know what to do, but I was working with a woman who left the FBI to go work with her husband at Army Intelligence. And she called me up and she said, "You should apply for these intern jobs at the department that Army Intelligence is offering. They're looking for people with political science degrees." And she said, "You'll be making more money than what you're making now." So that's what I did. I applied for an internship with Army Intelligence. Now, what that internship did is it gave me exposure to the whole intelligence community in the United States. So I learned what each organization did, how they did it, why they did it, how intelligence is gathered, how you write reports, how it's disseminated, how policymakers make decisions based on intelligence gathering. And I just kind of learned the whole gamut.
Right.
Now, at the end of 2 or 3 years of the internship, they gave me a job, and my area of expertise was supposed to be Central America, and this was back in the early 1980s, which it was a hotbed back then.
Hmm.
So I worked as a Central American analyst. Now, my mother had called me up. It must have been 1982, 83. It was after in the it was must have been in after the summer, and she said her and her friends were looking for something to do because my mother liked to take art classes, or she always liked to do something. So I told her, I said, "Why don't you take the ESP class that the university offers?" And she said, "I think I will." So her and her friends did. Well, as it turned out, my mother had psychic abilities, and so she could take people's rings or watches and hold them and tell them. It's called psychometry.
Right.
Okay, so that was and my mother had, and from that class she ran into some people that she knew that introduced her to another ESP class. So my mother was becoming very involved, and I liked it. And in the meantime, my father had passed away, and I was having a difficult time with his passing. So my mother sent me a book, and she said, "Read this book. It will help you understand your father's death." And it was called a book. It was called um, The World Beyond by Ruth Montgomery. And I read that book. I resonated with the book, and she did automatic writing. And I said, "Let me try this automatic writing." So I did. So
Right.
I started to channel. And
Right.
then after I channeled, I started to work with other tools. I tried tarot cards. Well, I didn't know it at the time because in intelligence work, programs are compartmentalized. And I had heard that there was a special access program where Department of Army was using psychics. I couldn't believe it. And the only reason I found out about it is because no matter who command, they bring in generals. The military rotates. So what happens is that they brought in so whoever is the commanding general of the Army intelligence inherits. They automatically inherit the psychic program. And of
Right.
course, the psychics are sitting somewhere different. They're up in a very secluded location. They're not with, you know.
Yeah, yeah. If I may interrupt, I know because since we're going giving a lot of information in one stretch, so I just want to sort of go back and just dwell a little bit on some of the points you mentioned, and then we can come back to this section on the psychic, the special access program. So you mentioned that you had these abilities as a child, out of body experience and premonitory dreams. How was your childhood and like growing up years? Was it normal, or was the influence of these forces?
No, no,
Uh,
no, no. It was very normal, very normal.
okay, it wasn't like you were like one of these superhero kids who could prevent
No, no,
tragedies and things like this.
no. It was very normal. I mean, I had strong intuitions about certain things, but it was very normal. It was very normal.
Okay, and you mentioned the chemistry teacher who taught ESP. I find that very fascinating. So I know that I know that some people have a lot of innate ability and skill and possibly genetic, but then I also learned from a little bit of research that it's kind of a learnable skill. People can train themselves to do this.
Of course.
So how does what was the chemistry teacher doing? What does a ESP class look like? Is that like a set of exercises to train people to bring out their
Oh,
abilities, or
sure. Oh, sure. Oh, sure. He would teach us how to meditate, and then he would, describe the picture. What do you sense? He would teach us how to read auras. He would put, somebody at the back, on a white wall, and then what you look for. Oh, yeah. And a lot of it is training the subconscious on how to receive information. You
right?
focus on something. Yeah.
Right. And then after a while, you clearly see that the skill is improving and is it something that you can very clearly get better at? Like if you were to
Oh,
score it,
yeah.
for example.
Yeah, we're born. I mean, we're born when we're born in the intuitively we know when it's time to come out of the womb. When we die, intuitively we leave. The intuition's there, the ability's there. It's there for everybody. It's what people want to do with it. I think that in our society, in the Western society, we don't teach it. By the time my abilities were very I was very open before I went to school. But once I went to school, I'm on a schedule. I have to
Right.
sit in the line. You sit in a certain place. You have to learn certain things. You're using the part of the brain that teaches you how to do math and how to read. So it's you're taken away
Yeah.
from you're being immersed in I'm being immersed into society. I'm acting the way that people want me to act.
Right. So all your resources, mental resources, energies are being redirected and redeployed into conforming to
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
material, and then you sort of cease to use
And
those
no,
faculties.
sees or it doesn't happen. You're not as open. So now I noticed that a lot of times whenever we would have breaks at school, that you would usually have like long holiday breaks
Right.
in the summer. I noticed that the abilities would come back because I wasn't. I didn't. I was free. I was
Right.
free.
And so just to jump back to the point where I interrupted you, so you discovered, so you were working for
Army intelligence,
right,
and I guess that there was a commanding general named General Bert Stubblebine, and he was very interested in the paranormal. He bent spoons. And he had a man by the name of Colonel John Alexander that worked for him, and they knew that there were remote viewers that remote viewed, which is putting information in an envelope and then you access and describe it. But
right,
they wanted to know who was out there doing what, who has these special abilities, and it's more than remote viewing. It was psychokinesis, and so they're always out looking, and they made it very well known that they're looking for people with abilities. So when I found out that, well, I was doing the automatic writing and the tarot cards. I was almost giving readings professionally at that time. So I approached him and said, I'm interested in the job. This must have been in 1983. No, 1980, must have been 1984. I
right,
approached him and said that I wanted the job. Well, what happened was he was retiring at that time because I think he wasn't getting the support. The program it was like it was a ball. It was like a ball. It was always being bounced around. It was hard to keep
right,
that kind of program. It was all you were always fighting to find funding to keep it open, and
right,
I don't think he was receiving the support that he needed from the Pentagon, from the Joint Chief of Staff. I don't think, and he just retired. He just decided to retire because he wanted to start his own company dealing with ESP or psychics, whatever.
right.
So he decided in 1984 to quit, to retire. So I thought, well, there went my chance of getting into this program. Well, when he retired in 1984, the Army was responsible for the remote viewers, and those were mostly military Army men. But you had the Defense Intelligence Agency, which was a civilian organization that supported the military, who was giving contracts out to Stanford Research Institute for paranormal investigation research. And the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, they were funding Stanford Research Institute, SRI. They were funding Princeton, another university that did parapsychology research. There was Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. So you had the Defense Intelligence Agency conducting research and development in paranormal, and they
Right.
also had analysts that were looking at what other countries in the world, what they were doing in parapsychology. So you had this robust effort that
And was it all
Congress.
classified?
Oh
Or
yeah.
because I know that also as a subject, something like that, maybe these days it's openly, you can talk about it, but then maybe
No,
back then it was
well,
taboo?
they weren't really advertising. Well, a lot of information on what they were receiving on what other countries were doing were in journals.
Right,
We had scientists sitting there that would, they would get they would buy magazines in Spanish from, Bolivia or Peru or Russian.
right,
They would get they would gather this. It was considered open source, unclassified. Then
right,
we would have the linguists translate them, and we could tell what they were doing. We could tell
right. But I meant
because
also the program itself that you were looking to enroll in, obviously
oh,
to let the people know that funds are being used for, psychic work. Was that something that was acceptable? Was it done in a sort of down low, very quietly,
no,
to channel funds?
no, it was way it was funded was through Congress for the intelligence community. It was just, of course, we didn't say where all the money. You don't know where all the money's going to exactly where. It's just very general.
Right,
We got this.
right,
We have this much money. We're going to put it into the intelligence community. So much will go here. So much will go there. So much will go there. We were in that. We were in
right.
that.
Okay, that's very interesting because, as somebody who looks in, researches this topic, one thing that keeps coming up over and over again is the idea of black projects and gray
Yeah,
projects, and projects like onions, layers upon layers, where you never quite know where the money comes from, where it is funneled, and some of them just go down, in projects that you never hear about and things like that.
yeah, that's
So,
right.
so that's very interesting.
We
And
so we had there was this whole research going on with the Defense Intelligence Agency,
right,
and the remote viewers at sitting at Fort Meade, they were used by all the intelligence agencies, CIA, NSA. If you had a question, if you wanted to use them, you could task them.
so it was seen as a legitimate apparatus of information gathering, which could
It
be
was
used
legitimate.
for, right,
It was
right,
legitimate. It was congressionally mandated by
right.
Congress with congressional language. Absolutely, with money
Wow, that's
going into the
fascinating.
budget. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How many people were there? Was it a large team, or did you work? Did you know of other people, or were you all like compartmentalized in silo where you don't know who else
No,
is
no,
doing it?
no, 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 no. We all worked. I mean, we went into one. They had a structure. Everybody worked together. There was
Okay.
probably less than 12 of us all at one time. There wasn't. I don't know. They didn't have. Let me see. How many remote? One, two, three, four, five. I don't know. Maybe 6 to 8 viewers at a time, and then you had monitors, and then you had operational people. You had a secretary. You had a boss. I mean, it was a very small office. Only maybe 12 people at the most, if even that.
So it's almost like mimicking a typical corporate structure with like managers and project managers and people.
Yeah, we had a boss, and then we had somebody who had to take care of the operations. We had a secretary for the timekeeping, and we had the remote viewers. Yeah, it was very
Right.
simple.
Right. Now, my exposure to remote viewing actually came from reading Ingo Swann, and I understand somehow. I mean, I'm sure there were people before him and after him who've done it also, but then officially, in some kind of way, in public imagination, he's the one who sort of brought it to public imagination, called it coordinate remote viewing. I think they worked with a bunch of people and made this. I found this coordinated remote viewing manual floating around on the internet, and did you ever have to work with Ingo Swan or meet him or work on that protocol
No,
or
no, I'll get back to that. I need
okay,
you have to. I want to tell you how this program survived,
okay,
because see, the general, he was the boss. The Army intelligence owned the remote viewers. Okay, he
hmm,
retired because he wasn't getting support from the Pentagon. So in 1984, when he planned to retire, that program shut down. The remote viewers were no longer allowed to work. It was shut down because it
right,
was under Army. So people were sitting around at Fort Meade where the remote viewers were, and they were waiting to find out where do they go work next, because that's what the military, they were waiting for their next assignment. Well, in 1984, DIA, who was doing research and funding parapsychology research, went to Congress. And there was a man by the name of Dr. Jack Verona. And he said, do not close down the remote viewers, just transfer them from Department of Army to me. So what happened was it took about a year. It took about a year from 1984 to 1985
right,
to do the transfer. So now everything fell under the Defense Intelligence Agency. I got approached in January 1986 to be part of the program. By the time I was interviewed and my clearances were set, I officially became part of the program in July 1986. That's how I got there. That's how I.
all right,
Now,
okay,
as far as Ingo Swann, he did do coordinate remote viewing. Ingo Swann was not at Stanford Research by the time I arrived. I had no
okay,
contact with Ingo Swann. I never studied from Ingo Swann, and I never met Ingo Swann. There were two people at SRI, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ. They were the big researchers on remote viewing. By the time I came in, I believe Hal Puthoff was retired, Targ was about to retire, and I only worked with Dr. Ed May. So there was another remote viewer there by the name of Joe McMonigal, who was a really good remote viewer. He retired in 1984. Ed May came in on, I guess, as the project manager from Stanford Research. He came in 1985, and I came in 1986. So I don't have the past record with, I guess, with Targ and Putoff and with Ingo Swan. But
Right.
Ingo Swan did do coordinate remote viewing, and the military people in the office where I worked, they did coordinate remote viewing. Now, there was another method called extended remote viewing that people were using before coordinate remote viewing. Joe McMonigal did that. And I think what happened when I went into the program, they had enough coordinate remote viewers. It was the office was top heavy on coordinate remote viewers. They needed to train people in extended remote viewing, so they put me into extended remote viewing with maybe one or two other people. So I did extended remote viewing.
Interesting. So just to contrast between both the styles, I know that coordinate remote viewing, for example, is where you give the actual coordinates of a location, like a blind thing. So the person who's giving it also doesn't know it's in an envelope, and then it's given. It's like a double blind test. It's given to the remote viewer. So what is the extended remote viewing in terms of methodology? What is it?
It's
How
met
is it
you
different?
you kind of lay down and you meditate. You put yourself into a self-hypnotic state and you meditate and you receive impressions. And then you come out and you write a report and draw pictures. You don't do it in stages. And I did well, first of all, I went in as a channelist, which I thought I was going to channel. They told me, no, you can't channel. That's bad. I had a bad habit. They were going to teach me the right way. They were going to teach me extended remote viewing. So that's what I did. I studied extended remote viewing. Now, the coordinate remote viewing, that was done because the the Defense Intelligence Agency went out to Stanford Research and said, come up with something that we can explain. They were getting tired, or people high up in the government were getting tired of going to Congress trying to get money and being laughed at for hiring psychics. So
Right.
they said, can you come up with something, show us something, make it scientific, tell us how it works, make it scientific because so SRI tasked Ingo Swan, and they said, write up, tell us how it works. So he put the word signal line. He
Right.
made the steps. You're going to reach this in this step. You're going to reach this in this step. It's going to be more advanced, and he did that. Now
Okay.
he it was meant as a way as a manual to try to get for people that don't understand this to in other words, to try to get money to get people to understand it, because the program was like a yo-yo. You never knew it was good. Every year you were fighting to save it. So that's what Ingo Swan did.
Right.
Now it came back to the when it came back to the group, the remote viewing group, because they're military. Military loves to train. If you're in the military, military people love training. Well, they took that coordinate remote viewing manual and said, "Aha, this is how you do it." So they started to teach people, and they felt that this was the authentic. This is how you need to do this. Now, I talked to Joe McMahon, and Ingo wanted the other remote viewers at SRI to do his method, and they wouldn't do it. There was Pat Price, there was Ingra Hammond from Germany, there were other, and Joe McMonigal didn't do it, and Joe made a point. I teach remote viewing. I do not teach coordinate remote viewing. When I have coordinate remote viewers come to me, they can't believe how easy it is to skip the steps and just go right to the. Now, in coordinate remote viewing, you get these steps. So if I'm going to do coordinate remote viewing and I get information that's in step 3, but I'm getting it in step 1, I'm not
Right.
allowed to report it until I'm in step 3. Well, that holds me back. That holds me back. And it's so hard to get information as it is. Why would I want to hold back and wait to get to step 3 when I already have the information?
Right.
So later on, once I was um, later on in the program, there was a strong emphasis from the military. They wanted everybody in the unit to be trained in coordinate remote viewing. And I said, I will be trained in coordinate remote viewing if they're trained in extended remote viewing. I said, it has to be. And I was trained in coordinate remote viewing, and I hated it. I didn't like it. I couldn't do it. And I thought, so I don't know. I mean, some people like it. They do well with it. But that's what I know of coordinate remote viewing. So I
Right.
did extended remote viewing. Couldn't was not allowed to use my channeling. I was told it was a bad habit. About a year and a half after I was finished, about a year and a half as I was into the program, uh, a lot of personalities left. Skip Atwater had retired. The 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 colonel got reassigned, so it shifted. There were a lot of personalities that new personalities came in, and they had a different outlook. And they
Right.
felt it doesn't matter what methodology you use because you can't stop a person. A methodology is your personal thing. You can't tell somebody how to access and describe information. They're going to do it the best way they know how. The important thing is that you follow the protocol in remote viewing, and that is you don't tell the psychic information before they right before they do the project.
Right.
So we had new personalities, and they allowed me to do my automatic writing, which I did. And with the automatic writing, I was good at location, finding people, finding things, and that's how that started. And that's whenever, and then everybody made a fuss. They said they wanted everybody trained in coordinate remote viewing. And at that point, I was running operations. I was finding people, and then they put me in coordinate remote viewing, which really is, I'm like, are you kidding me? But I said, I will do it, coordinate remote viewing, but you have to be trained. And it lasted for a while and then it went away.
Right. I'd imagine a profession like a workplace of this sort would be like full of men, and were there a lot of women involved, or was it just
There were some
were you a
women,
minority?
there were some women, but they were military. There were women, but they were not. We had one woman. She was married to a general, and then we had another woman who was in the army, and she just quit, but she was still in the reserves. But she was military, and we
Okay.
had one woman come in the military. I think she was a captain. So there were women, but they were military. They were military women.
Okay, so I'm interested. I know because people generally believe that women can be way more naturally intuitive than men. For example, especially in the military, men are more sort of are used to very regimented ways of thinking and structured ways of thinking. So maybe do you think that can also, there's also a case to be made where if you have a women in an intuitive expert, just let them flow with whatever comes, and maybe the military men need some sort of a crutch to tell them like go here, do this, you know. Maybe it's like horses for
I,
courses.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, the military really thought that you could train. The problem with the office was once they had that manual and they had the coordinate remote viewing, they felt that they could train anybody. Well, and that was a problem because usually if you're looking for somebody to come into that office, I would be looking for someone who maybe was interested in going to psychics or maybe had a psychic experience and didn't know what they did, or someone that's just interested and would read the books. But they didn't do that. They would pick, because it was a special access program, you couldn't advertise the job, so we had to secretly bring people in. Well, one guy brought in his neighbor because he thought his neighbor would make a good remote viewer. Well, his neighbor happened to be a Mormon, and that the religions thought, it's
Yeah.
coordinate remote viewing was safe. It was safe because it didn't question your religious, your spiritual beliefs. When people get involved in this field, you change, you learn new things. You
Yeah.
so we had a so he brought in his friend, and because he thought he could make a good remote, and the guy was Mormon, and he stuck to that coordinate remote viewing manual like a Bible. And these were the people that were making the decisions as to who were they bringing in, and they were. I mean, I would have brought in. I mean, even whenever we met with when we met with
Right.
senators asked. They said, "Why would you bring in?" The senators said, they said, if I had cancer, I would be searching out the best cancer doctor in the world to help me cure my cancer. Why aren't you going after why aren't you going after people who may have a good success run? The intelligence community is huge. You can find people in there that maybe have these abilities. And even if you had to go out and look for somebody, if they passed a security clearance, bring them in. But the military didn't. They were CNS Stanford Research. They knew who they were bringing in. They had Pat Price, Halla Hammond, um, and if they ran out of people, they were going up to San Francisco and interviewing leftover hippies that were turning out that had higher abilities than what the military was bringing in. But you can train them, and you can train. They did train these people up to a certain level. They really did.
Right.
They really did. But there's something. But you have to go high. You have to go above that. You have to just.
Right. It's very interesting for me, like just to stick it on this topic of recruiting somebody into a classified special access program with clearances and everything. That must be really difficult to find a qualified person. And let's say for example, like you mentioned somebody who brought their neighbor. First of all, you have to be very careful, obviously, who you bring in, and you have to make sure that they don't reveal. So, what if a person comes in and you find that he's unsuitable for the job, but now he knows that the program exists? So, what happens
They
then?
don't. They don't tell you they don't tell you what you're going to be doing until you pass certain personnel. Until they don't tell you that. They just interview you. You do personality tests. You do certain things before it's even revealed. So they would have all of that. If they felt that somebody was not good for it, that person wouldn't know what they were going to do anyway.
Right. So there would be some kind of a cover program up front, like a facade they think they're applying for, which turns out it's not going to be that. That's
Yeah.
very interesting. And before I just quickly move to the actual remote viewing experience itself, I want to ask you, was there any science generated out of this? Like, were there any papers submitted? Did they actually find out anything concrete about human consciousness and the nature of reality and things like that? Or
Well,
would you not be in a position to know that?
that would have been that was we were hired Stanford Research to do that. So that would be in there, but that would have been in their file. That was what Stanford Research was supposed to do. That had the scientific. That was the science. But they were more interested in the brain. What's going on? The, they were contracted to find out what is my brain doing if I'm remote viewing. What
Right.
is it doing? How can I make something? How can I make this person? What is conducive to remote viewing? Now, they may not know how the brain works or how a psychic works, but Stanford, what is conducive to remote viewing? If you're going to put me in a room and you want me to remote view, you want me to have the optimum conditions so that so I can do a good job for you. If
Right.
Stanford was doing research on consciousness, that research would have been funded by somebody else, and that would have been funded by somebody else, and that research would have gone to somebody else. We were by Congress, we were remote viewing, and what we needed to know is how does remote viewing work? If you don't know how it works, what is conducive to remote viewing?
Right.
So in the brain, what's going on in the brain. So as far as that kind of stuff, we're, no we that wasn't us. I'm not saying that Stanford didn't do that research because they probably did, but it wasn't for us.
Okay. And from your point of view, from your experience and what you learned, are there any preconditions that are conducive to remote viewing? That, like, for example, if you were to give a list of, like it works better in the mornings or at,
Yeah,
on an empty stomach or something like this.
you want to make sure that you're not hungry. You want to go into maybe a semi-dark room, a little low light, quiet. Um, it doesn't matter the time of day, whatever is, whatever you feel strong about, whatever you feel good about, as long as you're not tired and you don't have to go to the bathroom. You can
Okay.
remote view.
And would you recommend also people use some sort of a crutch, for example, like audio files, frequencies, and things like that, or people can just do it without any support?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They would like the cool down. Yeah, you can use meditative music frequencies. I feel that helps. I feel that helps. It can help. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It
And
gets the brain. It's a brain thing. You've got to get that right brain syncing up. It's syncing up or whatever. It's something goes on with the brain to get you ready to remote view.
right. And in your experience, did you ever see people using like stuff like DMT or hallucinogen, or like any mind altering drugs at all?
No, 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 no. We were not allowed.
Okay.
We were not allowed because no, absolutely not. Because see, this Congress shut down MK Ultra because with the CIA because CIA was using drugs. They were using drugs to change the brain.
Right.
And I guess a couple of people died. They committed suicide. So the CIA shut down MK Ultra. Now, our people, the government officials, kept going to Congress and kept saying, we need a remote viewing program, we need psychics because the Soviets are doing it. They're spying on us, we need to spy on them, and we need this psychic program. And CIA and Congress kept saying no, they weren't going to put up with the same crap that the CIA put them through.
Right.
So after a while, Congress came through and they said, we're going to give you a program. We're going to give you a remote viewing program, but it's going to be, but this is what's going to happen. You're only going to remote view. You're not going to be looking at psychokinesis. You're not going to be bending spoons. The contract is for remote viewing only. And there
Right.
will be anything that affects the mind is out. So we had lawyers at the Pentagon, uh, and and they were lawyers. They did the contract. I mean, they did the contracts on what was allowed and what was not allowed. Now,
That's very interesting for me because when people outsiders, especially people who have no connection to the U.S. intelligence apparatus, look at we've watched all these movies and read in the media, the whole Pentagon and CIA and all these people, the defense intelligence, it comes across as like some kind of an evil sort of manipulative regime which does all these dark things and controls people from behind the scenes. But then to say that there is also human rights, safety of human
oh
rights,
yeah,
and there are lawyers and everything, that's kind of, so it's fascinating to know that happening
oh it was
inside
that
the
yeah.
organization.
There were lawyers. There were and we had Dr. May, who was the researcher. He needed to take us to. He did research on. They wanted to see what the right brain was doing, so he had to probe us. We went to a couple of times. We went, and he had to explain to the lawyers at the Pentagon exactly what the experiment was, what he was going to do to us, what he hoped to gain from it. But no, they weren't taking any crap. And I know a lot of times people would come to us and say, "Well, did you do this?" And did you do? We said no. The contract was for remote viewing only. Now I can remember one time we had a remote viewer bring in a. We had one building that we walked to do remote viewing exercises. One building was for remote viewing only, and then the other building was our office where we could sit and wait till we remote viewed. But one guy brought in a sensory deprivation tank
Right.
and he put it into the remote viewing building, and he was told he get that thing out of there because it can alter the mind. They said get it
Right.
out. He had to take it out of there. Now, A lot of times, if a remote viewer worked with another person, they called that person the monitor. So if you're doing extended remote viewing, it's sort of like you put yourself into like a hypnotic state. But we had to tell, we said that the remote viewer puts themselves into a hypnotic state, not the person that they're working with, not the trainer. Because the trainer could bring you down into, count to 10 backwards or let me know when you're ready. So it was, I know people don't believe that. I know people, I
Yeah.
mean, I worked for the FBI whenever it was 1979 when um, the FBI were no longer allowed to wiretap US citizens. So it was sort of like I showed up whenever after the cleanup, but it was,
So
I
human
know,
rights were followed, and there
human
was a place
rights.
for it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And if somebody if if somebody came to me and wanted to remote view and I said I don't feel like it, they couldn't touch me. But I wouldn't do that. But a lot of they would, if I would say no, I'm not going to. I don't feel like remote viewing today. Nobody could do anything about it.
Were you ever asked to do something that you thought was unethical or something that was
No,
an invasion of privacy that you felt like that? No.
no.
Okay. Uh, I just want to understand. So I'm sure. I mean, I've read. Of course, there are a lot of cases which you professionally solved, and there's a like how it was used and everything. I'm sure readers can find out from the internet and everything. But then I want to understand from from your point of view, what does it entail? How does it feel? Like, so you're sitting in a room, and the monitor is not in the same room, or is he in the room with you?
Well, no. If I used a monitor, they're in the same room. Yeah, they're in
Okay.
this absolutely.
And then you're seated in a chair. I'm just trying to go through. So you're seated in a chair, and then you close, and then you enter. You try to enter that state all by yourself. And then how does it feel? So how do you direct your consciousness to the target? Like, how do you know where to look and what to look for?
You just meditate and you focus. They'll give you like maybe the coordinate or there's a picture in envelope 1, access and describe it. So you just focus. You need a focus. I intentionally focus my mind on envelope number 1 and impressions will come. Impressions will come.
Right.
And then you come out after a little while and you report your impressions.
And the impressions can be anything. It can be any kind of sensory information. No, it could be words, sounds, images, colors, shapes.
Yeah, and it comes as pictures in your mind. Like you see a picture, like I see a square, or I see a triangle.
Right.
Shapes are wonderful. The subconscious loves shapes. They like
But
design.
how does this translate into complex real world data? For example, if you like okay, so if you get a triangle from there, how do you go to okay, there is this person in this place doing this, you know?
Oh, I don't know. It's I don't know.
Okay.
So I see a triangle. Is it man-made? Is it man-made? Is it natural? I have to, I see a man-made triangular object, and then I get the surroundings. And then they just match it up. But a lot of it had to do with a lot of the like we called those fix a lot of it was structures of the former Soviet Union, access
Right.
and describe the structure and what goes on in the structure. So a lot of that was that. I think Joe
Right.
McMoneagle was able to describe the first nuclear submarine that the Soviets built.
Wow, yeah, that's quite an achievement to describe something in that detail of some importance. So I don't mean to be annoying, but just just quickly to go back to that point where you just said, so I'm putting myself in this position, so I see this triangle. So do you involve yourself in self prompts? You ask yourself, okay, I see a triangle. What next?
No, I sometimes if you can't get sometimes the information will just flow in and you get it and boom you're out and you write it up. But sometimes if you can't get it, like I think Joe self prompts a lot. I don't self prompt that much. But I think
Okay.
viewers do talk about I yeah, you can. There's not yes, you can self prompt absolutely. Anything that you do that helps.
And the fact that you have to write it down as you do it is doesn't interfere with the process.
No, no, you write it down. You write it down after you do the session. you write the formal report. I'm doing a session. I'm not
Right.
getting up and then writing and going back. I'm doing a full session.
Right.
I'm laying back, I'm relaxing, I'm remote viewing, I see things. It may take 20 minutes, it may take 10 minutes, it may take 40 minutes. Then I get up and then I write my report.
Okay. But there is no time restriction on these sessions. They don't tell you if you don't come out in 2 hours, then stop it, give it up.
No, no, no. But you can't go too long because if you go too long, you start making things up.
Right. Right.
You go,
That was.
it's initial. It's the initial information, a feeling. A good session could take 20 to 40 minutes. When you start going into hours, 1 hour, you're making up information because you're talking about energy. Energy. You need the energy to come to you. Even when
Right.
I give readings, people want 1 hour readings. Well, the energy starts dissipating after 50 minutes. So what happens is I start repeating information. But it's energy coming in. It's a subconscious coming into your brain. And
Right.
what happens is that you have to know when you have to know when to quit, because if you stay in too long, then you're into imagination. And I've
Right.
seen it in remote viewers that work
Right.
cases. They'll give
Right.
you 2 hours worth of information, and all you need are the first couple of paragraphs, and you have what you need. But
Right.
they go in. They think by staying in, then you're into imagination.
Right. Just to quickly round off the topic of remote viewing, just one last question on that point. How do you know, like, how do you prevent what they call analytical overlay from your mind from, you know, interpreting the information?
I don't know. That's a CRV term, or that's a coordinate remote viewing term. I
Okay.
don't know. This is what I teach people, that the subconscious is receiving the information, not the conscious mind, the subconscious mind. And it
Right.
teases you. It teases you. So I may be remote viewing and I see a picture of an airplane. Okay, now I don't come out and write airplane. I guess that airplane in my mind could be considered analytical overlay. I come out, and when I write my report, I don't say airplane, I say vehicle. That way I'm covered.
Right.
I say vehicle. It's how you report it. If the analytical overlay is giving you something concrete, you report around it.
Right. Right.
If the analytical overlay gives you a pyramid in Egypt, I don't say, oh, I see a pyramid in Egypt. I say, oh, I see a triangular structure. Most likely it's man made, it's in a hot area. You report around the analytical overlay. That analytical, it's giving you a piece of information, but not the exact information, so you have to report around it. That's why I tell all my students, if you see, if it's not a train, it's not a car, it's not a plane, it's a vehicle.
Right.
And
Now,
that's how
I know the program's shut down and then you've retired and everything, but then do you find yourself continuing to use these abilities, especially remote viewing and the other abilities in your real life for something, in your personal life
well,
maybe?
I
For yourself?
it's hard for you to do yourself because you lose objectivity. But I do. I've worked for Ed May when I retired. He had received some funding. They needed to do some trial runs in remote viewing, so I helped him. Sometimes I get clients who want me to look at certain things, certain structures, and they pay, and I do readings sometimes. So I'm still involved, but I'm doing a lot of writing now. I'm doing a lot of writing, and I'm trying to get a children's animation project animated.
Right. And I know that apart from remote viewing, you also have a lot of other abilities, and it kind of falls along a spectrum. It's not like one regimented thing. So you can, there's telepathy and, like synesthesia, seeing lights and auras and stuff like that. Uh, do you think that repeated, experience in one sort of expands your intuitive abilities so that you get better in telepathy and other things and channeling and everything?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Like I'm a channelist. I'm a writer. I'm a channelist. But I was able to do extended remote viewing, which is meditation, which is completely opposite of writing. So
Right.
Yeah, and I can. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's easy. It was easier to train me. It was easier. It's easier to train people. If they have one, you can bring them right into the other one. It's easier. You can enter a second modality much easier.
Right. And are these faculties existing all the time? For example, I did another podcast, I think last month with another. She was actually a German-speaking psychic medium and a clairvoyant. I think she's very famous in the German-speaking world. She's from Austria, Birgit Fischer. She says that she sees them all the time. Like
Yeah,
she's also a remote viewer. It's there. She has learned over time to turn it on and off. But then she told me while on the podcast, there's somebody standing behind you. There's somebody's doing this and stuff like that. Does it happen to you spontaneously, or can you turn it on and off?
I turn it on and off, and sometimes it works spontaneously, and sometimes it doesn't. And it hasn't been working spontaneously me for a while because I've been very busy doing other things. I really have a lot of other things that I'm doing, so I'm
Right,
really not devoting my time to remote viewing or to this subject like I used to.
right. So,
But it can happen. Yeah, it happens spontaneously. But it can happen to anybody spontaneously.
right. So I want to quickly move on to the last section. H- well, two things really quickly. One is my favorite topic, UFOs, which is the topic of the day, aliens and disclosure and so on. I know that you have had, you have seen a UFO. You mentioned at some point in some of the interviews before, so
13
I know that
years.
people can find out. Have you ever remote viewed a UFO or
No.
had contact with extraterrestrials
I
or
had
can summon
contact
them?
one time. But it wasn't through remote viewing. It was through living. I mean, there was an entity.
So there is no ongoing contact with people at the moment. Like it's not something that you can summon and talk to and communicate in your channeling with beings.
Oh, I do. I can do that. That's in channeling. But the what I had with the alien was not channeling. It was just, like we're talking.
In flesh, in
Yeah,
the physical
yeah,
form.
yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But
But
I
when you
can't
chat,
But I can't do that all the time. I don't do that all the time. My channeling, I can pick up my channeling and say, who do I have here? Or what do I need to know? Or, yeah, I can pick up. That's my channeling. I can do channeling whenever I want to.
wow. So how do you know who's talking to you? Like there are all kinds of entities. Like how do you know what their intentions are? If they're trying to fool you, how do you trust them? I mean,
I just trust them because they've been good to me.
right,
They've been good to me.
right.
And if people's heart, if people want it and their hearts are open, they're going to get it. They're going to receive it. But that's the first thing people ask you. How do you know you have good entities? How do you know I don't? I ask them.
Right.
How do you know? How do you know they're not pranksters? How do you know they're not? I asked them. How do you know they're not?
So it comes from trust and knowing intuitively
The
that they
heart.
are.
It's a heart. The heart is open. Your chakras are open. If somebody wants this and the heart, they're gonna they'll receive it. If the chakras are open, they'll receive it.
Would you consider yourself spiritual or religious at all?
I'm not religious. I was born and raised Catholic, but I can't go back to that because I would figure I'd like to think that I'm spiritual. I hope I'm spiritual, but I know I'm not religious. I know that.
Right. So, as a closing comment, I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's done all this, has it changed your worldview? In the sense, do you understand the nature of reality and the structure and the layers and the
Oh yes.
dimensions and afterlife and things like that?
Oh
And how has
yeah.
it changed your everyday living?
That life that well, I was born and raised Catholic. Everything's a sin. Everything's a sin. Everything's not a sin. You know, P- we come in, we have karma. We're going to go through our life. We have karmas, good and bad. We have good karmas, we have bad karmas. There's an energy force that is God that's out there. I think Jesus was a teacher, Buddha was a teacher. We've had great teachers that they're here to teach us, and that we should try to live the right way. Be honest, the golden rule, treat others like we would want to treat ourselves, and that just know that there's more out there after we pass on,
Yeah.
and that we're here to evolve to become better, hopefully.
Have you personally communicated with a being of that level, like what you would consider a master or a god or as close
Oh,
to God as
sure.
possible?
Sure, my guides, sure. They can
Wow.
be very humorous. funnier than what people, we on earth think we are so important. We think we are so important, and we take life seriously. We take our spirit can be very, very funny, very funny.
Right. Fascinating. So, on that note, I think we'll wrap up the conversation for today. Angela, thank you so much for joining us and talking through your experiences. And I'm sure I actually have a whole bunch of things written out, but then I don't think we'll have time for all of that. But thank you for agreeing to come on the channel, and thanks for telling us all the experiences.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to meet you and to know you. You're good, and
Thanks.
you're good.
Thank,
You're a good interviewer. Thank you.
thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.